I call it pretty piss poor PPP is what it was. The PPP doled out $787 billion to allow businesses and nonprofits to pay employees when they were forced to close. Nearly half of the largest 300 law firms and three-quarters of the largest accounting firms were forgiven on their loans. This is money that was loaned to these entities to pay their employees. Up to $200 billion was stolen from the program for small businesses. This is what so far the federal government admits to.
Hmm.
We have to keep that in mind.
Right.
I am pretty convinced that they are lowballing us,
Very
but
likely.
what I want people to realize is, and I've used this analogy a number of times because I think it's a good analogy. The arsonist comes, sets the building on fire, then they put their fire suit on, and the 911 call goes to them to come put it out.
Hmm.
The Paycheck Protection Program went to businesses to allow them and nonprofits to pay employees when they were forced to close. What it says right there, they were only forced to close because of federal and state mandates to close quote unquote non essential businesses. So the government forces you to close your doors. Then they turn around and become the savior and give you money to pay the employees and yourself, presumably, because they forced you to close. Does anybody understand how insane this is? They created the quote unquote need for these bailouts, and they came, printed money, which we don't have, that your kids and grandkids and great grandkids are going to pay back and then give it to you. If this does not illustrate the insanity of the federal government getting involved in what should be local and state issues, I don't think anything will.
3.6 billion of this PPP money went to entities on the Treasury's do not pay list. The Small Business Administration didn't check the list before cutting the checks.
Bill, it's all almost like a great comedy line. Can you please read that again so
Yeah.
everybody
Oh
really
no.
heard what you said?
3.6 billion went to entities on the Treasury's do not pay list. The United States Department of Treasury keeps a list of entities and people that they are not going to pay. Either they owe tax money or they have a tax lien against them. SBA themselves say they didn't check before cutting the checks. 57,000 entities on the do not pay list were actually paid by the Small Business Administration. And again, Mark, it's like you said, the arsonist puts on his gear and goes back when the 911 call is made to put the fire out. This was announced by DOJ. This is my old organization, DOJ, right? Technically, I work for the Department of Justice. They announced this as if they're so proud to have caught this, not realizing that it was another arm of the government that made this possible, right? 3-month investigation by DOJ caught scammers, and in one case, the stolen COVID money was used in a murder for hire plot. So the US government facilitated a murder for hire plot and then proudly said, we solved the crime. That's scary, Mark. That's scary when that much money is going out there. You talked about accounting firms and law firms. Ernst & Young, a big three accounting firm, over 365,000 employees. Now, this one I wanted to talk about or at least mention because in my role at DEA, I was responsible for the territories of Guam and Saipan. Not not obviously there's crime there, very different than what we would see here in Los Angeles or where you are in Florida. The Guam office of Ernst & Young took a $750,000 paycheck protection loan that was forgiven. I want people to understand that when you and I discuss this, and I think you said it, you said, "Hey, I'm just mad I couldn't get a piece of this money," jokingly, but of course, there's some amount of curiosity about that. I don't think you and I are being critical as much of the businesses that took the money, but more of a critique of the program that allowed them to take the money and allowed them to qualify for the money. And that's an important distinction. Like, do I think that Ernst & Young did something wrong? No, I'm sure they had lawyers look at this and say, "Hey, we can qualify for this. We can get $750,000. Let's do it." And that's what businesses do. If there's loopholes in the tax code, they're going to take advantage of it if it's legal. Paycheck Protection Program was a huge source of loss. And so, Mark, 3.6 billion went to entities on the do not pay list.